Hello, and welcome to the Hello, I'm Grieving podcast. I am your host, Dr. Julie Shaw, founder of the Hello, I'm Grieving community, where we focus on acknowledging and dealing with grief to live a full life. Our tagline, Say Hello to Grief, emphasizes the importance of mindfully and courageously acknowledging and engaging with grief so we can find hope, lessons, motivation, and healing in the midst of our pain. So today we have the opportunity to say hello to Briana Simmons. So thank you so much for being here, Briana.
Of course.
And I just really want to intro Briana really quickly. And Briana Simmons, her pronouns are she, her, is a life cycle facilitator, creative, and advocate who is passionate about community care, mind, body, and spirit attunement as a vehicle for personal and collective liberation. As a Black queer femme with big hoodoo energy, she is committed to unearthing dignified cycles between life and death, especially for Black LGBTQ plus and or spiritual folk. Her work is anchored by personal practice, intuition, and working directly with clients and families through her organization, Unearthing Tradition. Unearthing Tradition is a holistic wellness organization that exists to create an unapologetic healing spaces for Black folks to exhale, especially in the midst of sacred transitions. As the founder and creative director, Briana finds doing this through creative collaborations, speaking, writing, organizing, holistic wellness products, and one-to-one or group life cycle support services to be the most expansive. So, with all of that, and I'm sure we could go on more and more, which we'll get into here, I wanted to say hello. So, how are you doing
Hi.
today?
I am feeling good, honestly. Um, it has been quite the week, quite the month already, quite the season. So I'm coming with some pretty grounded energy, I feel.
Good. That's
How are
great.
you?
And I'm going to throw this in, especially after Beyonce. Maybe Beyonce grounded you as well.
Yes, she did. She lifted me up and brought me back down and back and forth again. So,
I love that. I love that. Which I might bring Beyonce back into the conversation. I think there's
sweet.
always room to do that.
Mhm.
Um, but I wanted to actually get to something that you've been working on, and that I've been watching your posts on, and it's
Yeah.
been really cool to see. And that is Biking for Black Babies. And so, can you tell us more about this organization and what it's all about?
Yes, of course. I was hoping we were going to have a chance to talk about biking for Black babies. So today is what, October 5th? That means we are about 8 days away from the start of Biking for Black Babies. This is an initiative that has been in the works for years. It's being led by a certified professional midwife of the name Demetra Sariki, who is based in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Um, her own personal journey with loss and health challenges really led her to, combine all of her personal experiences and how she shows up in community to birth this idea. So the organization is called Womb Cycle. And through Womb Cycle, the Biking for Black Babies initiative is a multi-state cycling tour. This year is the inaugural tour. We are going to be traveling from North Carolina to Louisiana. Yes, North Carolina to Louisiana. I've said that so many times over the last I've said that so many times over the last few months, and now that we're so close, it's like really sinking in that that's what we're doing. But the purpose is to raise awareness of Black infant mortality and to uplift community based midwives and offer support to families, particularly in those areas who have experienced loss. October is Infant Mortality Loss Awareness Month. And so, yeah, we are putting our bodies on the line to really kind of ring the alarm and bring awareness to what's happening and create some change.
I love that. I love that so much. And thank you for even acknowledging that because as we're recording, it is October.
Hmm.
And understanding that it is Infant and Pregnancy Loss Awareness Month. And
Yeah.
being able to honor that and to be able to, like you were talking about, just putting your bodies to the test. And I
Mhm.
think when we are talking about that, when we're talking about grief, is we put our bodies to the test as well
Mhm.
as we're grieving, and the things that we hold in our bodies.
Yeah.
And I'm even wondering, as you've been gearing up and you've been getting out on getting your biking practice in, maybe how have you been either processing grief for others, processing grief
Mm.
for yourself
Mhm.
as you've been on that bike and
Yes.
been preparing for this?
That's such a good question, and something I've been reflecting about more recently. Um, in a lot of ways, I think cycling tours, I don't know, historically have been associated with a race, and so you're trying to go as fast as you can. This tour is not a race at all. We are not trying to get to Louisiana as fast as we can. We're trying to get there safely. We're trying to get there together. And so it's really made me slow down, even when I'm on my bike training, and be in a state of reflection about why I'm doing this and what
Mhm.
it means to be showing up for people in this way, but also as a birth worker, as a death worker. Um, it has helped me to really just be present. Being outdoors offers that anyway, but with such intention, I think it's just, yeah, really putting my whole body, mind, spirit to the test. Um, and I'm appreciative of that. I feel like I've learned a lot about myself in this journey. And as much as the cycling tour itself is centering the families who have experienced loss, as well as the midwives and birth workers who support them. It's been deeply personal as well. Um, in contemplating whether or not and if and how I want to grow my own family, and the challenges and barriers that are present for me in that way. Knowing all the things that I know is challenging to, take that step. So, yeah, it's been deeply personal, deeply collective, and really just a whole mind, body, spirit experience. And we are 8 days away from seeing what that is really going to be like.
I know, right? You probably have this, and even as you're describing it, right? I feel like I'm even envisioning that in my own mind. And I think again, I always connect things back to grief. And I
Mhm,
think it's such a great metaphor, what you just said, on how sometimes we might envision like how this is going to go, how our ride's
mhm.
going to go, or the hopes that we have for the
Right.
ride, or the things that we might be worried about or have anxiety about, or doubts about.
Mhm,
And when we start to create those stories, or when we start to think about all these things, when it really is, whether it's we're just taking one pedal stroke at a time, and
mhm.
really being present in that moment to see what this journey, like literally and figuratively, will bring up for you.
Mhm. Absolutely. I was talking to the cycling team. We have, group chats and things. And we were talking earlier today about how real it's becoming that we're just a little over a week away. And I think we're all kind of going through the motions and the feels of what this really means. We've been preparing for it for so long, especially the midwife, Demetra Sariki, has been really putting a lot of energy and time and effort toward this for a long time. And so to see it finally come into fruition, us getting all of the supplies and things that we need to be safe and well along this ride is really starting to sink in.
That's amazing. About how many people will be joining you for
There will
the ride?
be 6 of us. So this first time around, it's a small but mighty team, and we're gonna get out there and do the thing.
Amazing. That sounds really and I'm pretty sure it's gonna be a tight-knit group,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah,
even
we are gonna be closer than ever after this.
And are people coming from all over, or are they like, where are they coming from?
Most everyone is coming from Colorado. I'm based in Florida now, though, so I'll be coming from Florida.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I look forward to seeing that
Yes,
grow, and
yes.
hopefully we can get the word out through here too, to be able to
Yeah.
do that. you mentioned being a life cycle worker. And so for me, I love doing this podcast because I just get to learn and learn all the things that I don't know. And hopefully through this podcast, it gets passed on to other people. But can
Mhm.
you tell us more about what a life cycle facilitator, and please correct me if I'm wrong, like on the name, but this is the learning process, is what does that encompass? Like
Mhm.
tell us more about that.
Yeah, so when I began my journey in birth work, I was using the language of a full circle doula. That's what I was trained under. Um, Really, in digging more deeply into my story, it was death that brought me to birth work. Having supported um, and been present for my mom and my grandpa in hospice care and watching them transition in that way, supporting friends through their journeys of pregnancies and miscarriages and abortions. And so it became really kind of just a gumbo of all of the things. And so when I did my training with for as a full cycle or a full circle doula, I was very clear about wanting to situate my learning in the tradition of African American midwifery, Black midwifery, with traditional midwives. And through that process, about 7 years ago, I learned just the importance of naming things, giving language to things. And over the years, as we've really contended as a society with different terminology and whatnot, I was also wrestling with the term doula. For those that don't know, the derivative of the word doula is a Greek word for female servant or female slave. And learning that didn't sit well with my spirit. And so I started seeking other language to describe the role that birth workers play. There's birth worker, there's birth keeper. Um, some folks use other terms. And so I started to use that. And then once I did my death doula training with Going with Grace, I just was really contending with how to show up in what I had created as Unearthing Tradition and being able to offer support at both ends of the spectrum. Like, what do we call that? What do I call that? How do I give
Yeah.
language to that that embodies um, all that I am and all that I have to offer to community and to the families that I work with? And so I hadn't heard of life cycle facilitator before. It kind of became what's that thing that you do when you have a piece of paper and you just kind of write out words and
Like a
see if
brain
you can,
like
like just a
brain
brainstorm,
dump. Yeah,
brain
yeah.
dump, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I did that and I kind of sat with it for a while. And eventually I came up with Life Cycle Facilitator to really encompass how I believe care should be present for an individual and a family as they're transitioning. Um, and now, ever since I've started to use that language more and more this year, it feels so good. And I think it is very clear in what is available. And so, yeah, it feels good to me.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I really appreciate the definition that you gave of doula. And I also believe in that power of language and
Mhm.
even understanding how language has the power to change culture, right?
Yes.
And how we see things, how we understand things, and even even the historic, connotations that you bring
Mhm.
into that with really understanding the language that we're using,
Mhm.
especially as you are working with communities such as Black and Brown communities, such as LGBTQ plus communities. I know that words have been used in so many different ways to hold these communities down
Yeah.
and to continue to feel othered. And so it's
Mhm.
really great, what you're bringing back into this community as well. Can you speak about how it has been for you to be in these communities that have been historically, cast to the side or underrepresented, and been able to bring this death and grief work into this spaces there for those
Mhm.
communities?
It's a process. I think that, I want to acknowledge that I'm new in my journey, um, in a formal way of supporting folks in death and grief work. Um, but from what I've gathered so far, it's a process where most of the time, at least in my experience, there's a sense of acknowledgement that that type of space or conversation or advocacy or an education is needed. Um, and then there's an eagerness for it. Um, and so I'm finding that in the conversations that I'm having with people, there's a little bit more openness to having the conversations that have typically been either taboo or, swept under the rug or behind a closed door. And that feels good to know that that people are receptive to it. Um, and then once you get through that door, it's heavy, to be honest.
Absolutely is.
Um, it's
Absolutely.
heavy because there's a lot there. Um, for folks who have firsthand experience with death and grief and loss. But there's also that like secondary kind of presence of loss within communities that have been cast to the side or um, missed or underrepresented. And so it gets heavy, but I think the approach that I try and take with Unearthing Tradition is for us to be able to show up together in community and be real and raw and honest with each other, to have those like cultural moments that only we can understand with each
For
other,
sure.
and journey together where it starts to feel like family. Um, I try and approach my work personally and like share my own story when appropriate, um, just to be relatable, to say that I, in some way, understand what you're going through and have journeyed in those ways as well. And so those are the aspects that, I try and bring joy into so that we can be together and experience that exhale with
Yeah.
each other. So, yeah, once we get past the what used to be taboo and we get inside of what's heavy, I'm there to try and lighten it up and help you get through it.
That's amazing. I mean, we all need that type of support, right? And I think it's also, educating people on the need for that, especially as you talk about the life cycle, right? I think more people, even as we're looking at, um, different pregnancy losses and infant
Mhm.
loss, what you're biking for, right? Especially in certain communities with the high rates in the Black communities
Yeah.
specifically, but really understanding that, with the birth and the death, that there are these connections. There's these
Mhm.
connections, and people are becoming more familiar with having birth doulas there, right?
Mhm.
I had one, right? My
Mhm.
wife and I had one.
Yes.
And it was something that we always look back on and that we're so grateful that we had, because um first off, it was a challenge to even get to that point where we were able to
Mhm.
have a child. Um, but to be able to have that education and support, but most importantly, advocacy in the room,
Yeah.
because there were different points which we were warned about, right? That we may be told we need other procedures, or that we should just jump to a C-section when
Mhm.
we can still try to have a natural birth, which was our goal and
Right.
which we did. Um, but if it wasn't for our doula in the room, I don't know if we would have been able to advocate for ourselves, especially with all the
Mhm.
knowledge that she had. And I think it's important for more people to learn about people that can help you facilitate the end of life, right?
Mhm.
Because those two, that birth and death, are so much more connected than we have given thought to, in the
Mhm.
past. I know you mentioned, how you've been able to share your own experiences,
Mhm.
and you mentioned earlier about that's kind of been one of the things that has moved you into this space, bearing
Mhm.
witness to your own family members.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering, even in contrast with the work that you do now, um, I guess, how were you able to carry your grief for your family members and also bear witness, and then lead you to this now?
Mm. That's a good question that I ask myself every single day. How did I end up here doing this?
Same, same, same.
You
But
know?
it's death.
Um,
Death is going to happen, and it changes your life, and then
yeah,
it steers you in a whole other direction. But everybody
literally,
has their own
quite
experience,
literally.
so I want to know yours.
Yeah. I don't know. My journey has been like a jumble of a lot of different things, a lot of different passions and interests that seem to come together, at least in my mind, pretty seamlessly, reflecting on where I was and where I'm at now. Um, I think the through line is that I really care about how things are done. Um, I really care about the process and the journey. Um, and I think the through line is like, I want the process, whether it's of giving birth or dying or creating something, to feel loving. Um, and especially in sacred times that can feel really isolating, how can we infuse more care into those transitions? And so I was 16 when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. Just a few months prior to that, my grandpa, her dad, was died from cancer. And so it was a very heavy few months in my like junior year of high school. um, and it was confusing, and I was angry, and just all the things were coming up. And there was, a general sense of fear around, oh, I saw what happened to my grandpa just a few months ago. Um, and this is the beginning of my mom's journey, right? Um, she is my hero in that she continued to show up in every way that she possibly could as a mom, a wife, a daughter, a sister, until she couldn't anymore, until she really needed um, us to be there for her in the way she had been there for us all her life. And it was at that time when we started really talking about and thinking about what the end of her life was going to look like with the help of hospice care. She had in home nurses that would come to our house and care for her, make sure that her medications were going well, that would sit with her while, my dad or I had to be out. And that was the first time in that way that I had experienced something like that.
Mm, the
Um,
care.
that type of care.
Mhm.
My family has had a lot of health challenges that I've been present for, but they've been in the hospital settings. Um, and those types of settings have always felt like there's a disconnect, and like just a transactional
I get
situation
that.
happening.
Mhm.
And so when we were navigating hospice with my mom, to see folks who were willing to show up and bring positive energy and make my mom laugh and make sure that she got the things that she desired at the end of her life, whether it was extra medication to manage her pain or her favorite ice cream. Those types of things made me realize that we could do things differently. Um, her hospice nurse, whose name was Jackie, got really close with my mom. She was a Black woman who would just come, and I would say that they became friends
Mhm.
in whatever ways that they could during that time. And Jackie really took her time to get to know me and make sure that I got what I needed from my mom in the final months of her life. And I think that the thing that stood out about Jackie and the other folks that were caring for my mom at the time was that cultural connection and being able to
Yeah.
understand, little gifts and things to bring that felt like home. And so all those things combined really helped me to understand, okay, there's more here. We can expand on this. Um, and yeah, there are ways that we can infuse this type of care throughout our life cycle. And it took me some years after my mom died to arrive at that point, but that's kind of what started it off for me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like you could tell when you told it, you could tell the difference how you were describing that hospital setting to when you
Mhm.
actually found a great place for her to be at, and most importantly, the people. Because I
Mhm.
think it comes down to the people that we're surrounding ourselves with, not only in life, but come on, like at the end of life, like
Really.
who we have around us and who is feeding our spirits, our souls, our minds, as much as we can, because in which obviously this is the work that we do, but thinking about death and even thinking about what type of death do I want,
Mhm.
and being proactive about that and having open dialogues about that and having conversations about that's very important. So I'm really glad that Jackie was able to step in, especially with you being so young, right? Um, to be able to say, what are things that you need from your mom at this point. And I'm also maybe assuming that there was honesty in there too, right? Honesty about the situation, maybe honesty about what you might be experiencing, which is very helpful because I think as you're describing that, it makes me reflect and say, like, I wish I had that for my sister. If I would have known that there were people out there like you, if there were people out there within the hospice, field that, or even what the hospice field was, I feel like I was just so in the thick of it that I didn't know what any of that was. I just knew hospital and different centers and all these different things that she was being transported to, but nothing felt like what you described. And I think it's not only the support of the individual, it's also
Mhm.
the support of the family members or friends or their community around them too that's
Yeah.
needed. And I'm sure, you're there to help with that as well, and
Yeah.
to help support them too.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I was intentional about using the word facilitator. Um, and thinking about how Adrienne Marie Brown talks about facilitation in her book Emergent Strategy, and other folks along that kind of thought. Um, I wanted to infuse the word facilitator because at the end of the day, when someone is stepping in to support someone through a sacred transition like birth or death, um, it's not about us, right? And we're not there as a replacement for the people who are closest to you, but we're there to help facilitate the type of experience that you want to have. And so I think it's really, really important for folks who are taking on that role to understand that key aspect of it, and really dig into having relationship with people so that they feel comfortable sharing their deepest desires, or their fears around their transition, so that you can either safeguard the space that they'll be in as they transition. You can help to advocate for the type of experience that they want. You can help to have conversations unfold that need to happen.
Mhm.
Just so many things. And so facilitation is a key word in how I describe my work.
I love this so much. So it's just great, and I just want as many people, out
I
there to
hope
hear
so.
you and to learn about all of this. And I think that's why I'm enjoying, doing this podcast so much, is because selfishly I'm learning and I get to meet some pretty dope people, but also it's just such good information. Um, because I think as people again reflect on their own grief, on their own death, and I know we're also including life in this too. Like
Mhm.
grief does make you think about your life.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about how you want to lead that life and what you want to do with it. And again, it is this cycle, because now what do I want to do with it? How do I want to be
Mhm.
at the end of it? All of this. So it's just making my head think about all the different types of cycles that we go through. I did want
Yeah.
to backtrack just a little bit, and it popped in my head, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
Mhm.
Um, because you made me think of this question that I like to ask folks, because you mentioned that your mom is, for me, is slash was your hero. And what would you want people to know about your mom?
That is a great question. Well, I feel like I tell this story a lot, but it's been so key to how I've lived my life since her passing.
Mhm.
Um, at the end of my mom's life, about a month before she died, she sat me down and had this, what I, at the time was like a very weird conversation for me because she was acknowledging that she was dying.
Mm.
And she was kind of offering her last words to me. And one of the things that she said was that stress will make you sick. Um, and in reflecting on that, in the 11 years since my mom has been gone physically, I've realized how much of a reality this like idea of strong Black womanhood
Mm.
is, um, and how that trope is literally killing us,
Wow.
um, because so much is required of us by society, by our family and friends and work folks and just everyone. We have asks coming in at all times,
And
um,
ourselves,
and
right?
ourselves,
And
yeah, and
ourselves.
ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I've been very adamant about removing things that bring stress, unnecessary stress into my life. And doing as best as I can to kind of undo that strong Black womanhood idea and be soft and
This is
be
that
willing
soft life
to
people are
just
talking
like
about.
be soft
Yeah.
and be ready and willing to receive from other people and be willing to say, no, I can't, I don't want to, and do it unapologetically. And so she left that with me for sure. And it's something that I feel strongly about sharing with other people. But also, I want people to know that my mom was kind. She was. Just really kind. I would describe my mom as like an R&B love song. You know, she
Okay.
had that like red nails and her gold tooth, her red lipstick, and her hair was wrapped. And yeah, she was just fine and young and kind and sweet. Um, yeah, and that's how I remember her at least. And so yeah, that's my girl.
I love that. Now I mean, if you know it right on the spot, but maybe outside of this, I want to know what R&B love song would it be?
There's 2 songs that I remember, that we used to sing together all the time. Nobody's Supposed to Be Here, Deborah Cox. We
Mm-hmm.
would just belt it out
That's
like
a
we sounded
ballad.
just like her. Oh, yeah. And then I remember one time we were in the car, like sitting out in the driveway out in front of our house, singing Before I Let You Go by Blackstreet. So those 2
Yes.
songs remind me of her all the time.
Yes. I know those both very, very well.
Yep.
I love it. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I love to hear these personal stories. And they bring joy, right? You talked about the
Yes.
joy that's there, and that we could find. You know, with Hello, I'm Grieving and saying hello to grief, and it seems like you do this on a daily basis. But what is your way that I guess that you find yourself to like say hello to that grief. And for me, say hello to grief is really about how are you acknowledging it, how are you owning it, how are you not shying away from the process.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, I feel like I used to have to do something like to say hello to grief, do something to acknowledge it, and absolutely, um, rituals and things like that are there to do that. Taking some intentional time to reflect and whatnot. But I think the thing that's most, I guess, visceral for me in saying hello to grief is just to sit in it and not feel like I have to do anything about it. Just be in it. And if that means that I can't get to that email today, then I just can't do it because I'm human and I'm going through it right now and I just need to be there. Um, and so, yeah, I would say that's how I say hello to grief is I try and just acknowledge it and if I'm feeling sad, just sit in that sadness. If I'm feeling angry, channel that anger and put it into something. Um, yeah, I just try to be with it.
Good. I'm all about that too because And I think it takes people time to get to that
Yeah,
place,
for
right?
sure.
And it can be do the things until you can get to that place where you can just sit in it.
Mhm,
And we need that push and encouragement as well. I'm still going back to the life cycle, right? And I'm thinking about the birth piece now, right? Like we've talked
mhm,
about the death piece, but I'm wondering in your experiencing working with folks
mhm,
through the birth cycle, where have you seen um, the grief there for
mhm,
folks? And how are you able to facilitate that transition or even just some of the things that they're experiencing? And this is probably coming from even my own personal experiences with pregnancy loss, and
mhm, yeah,
in, being an openly gay woman is also really understanding the different challenges that come along with having a child in a same
mhm,
sex relationship. But there's a lot that goes into that. That's a whole other episode. But I'm just wondering, kind of like, how do you help people during the birth cycle?
mhm. Yeah, I support all families, right? But my work tends to center Black folks, people of African descent. Um, and there I find that grief shows up um, almost always in the form of fear, fear of outcomes, right? Fear that despite doing all of the right things and having all the things that you could possibly need and seeking intentional care, that um, there's a certain destiny for you and your experience. And so, with that, I try and acknowledge the reality for folks and refocus us on our goals. Um, but I think the most important part is acknowledging that fear is real, that the systems of healthcare, particularly for prenatal care, are designed to leave some out.
Mm,
Um, and so I think just to have someone that reflects that back to them, that says, "I hear you, I see you," um, and commits to doing whatever we can so that that isn't their reality, that they don't become
yeah.
a statistic is important. But there's also, other ways that grief is present. I think in the pandemic, folks have talked a lot about how isolating pregnancy and just parenting is and
Yes.
can be. And I see that a lot with my friend group or my clientele is just that transition is so huge and there's not the proper types of care and support in place, even within our own communities. Um, and so that there's grief there. And one of the things that really stands out to me that, I feel like we are talking about more, but that there's so much that we can uncover is just the transition into postpartum and back to work and what
Yes.
that really means. Like, that's hard. Um, just this expectation that you are supposed to go through this, full body transition and have this living little, human to take care of and then go back to things as, business as usual without any care systems in place. There's a lot of grief around that. And so, again, there's only so much that I can do in those situations. But what I try and do is be a resource to different um, things that are available in community to lighten the load or help that transition be as easy as it can be. I try and get creative in helping folks to shift how they view their own community and what's available to them. And, if we say that we are about community care, if we say that, it takes a village to raise a child, I'm not a parent yet, but I can see the possibilities for how we can connect the dots here.
Yeah.
And so I try and make that visible to my clients as well. So yeah, I think first it's just acknowledging that the grief in whatever way it shows up is present, and then doing what I can to show up and be a resource to the families I'm working with.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing that all together because I mean, essentially it's just in what kept going on in my head was that there's
Mhm.
grief in all transitions.
Oh yeah,
I mean, in
even in
understanding.
the good ones.
Yeah, for sure. Even the good ones. Because even I mean, you're speaking my language when you're talking about parenting. Because now that she's actually here, it's that's a whole other transition.
Yeah.
And all the things you're talking about, if we do say it takes a village, then you're left wondering, where's my village? And I think
Hmm.
that is something that also happens in the death, right? Is
Hmm.
a lot of people in birth will say, oh, anything you need, I'll be here. How can I support you? And and then same thing in death, and
Hmm.
you might see more people are willing to support you when there's a new addition to the family, but there can still be a drop off,
Right.
in that, and when people then face that reality there can be grief there for them, but then
Yeah.
also in both you're looking at, I'm a new person now,
Hmm.
and so I'm a new person and I've changed, and maybe I didn't expect this change. I didn't know that this was going to happen, whether it is birth or whether it is death or sometimes all the things in
Yeah.
between. So,
Yeah. And I think, I think it's important to acknowledge that oftentimes when folks are saying that they do want to be there for whatever transition you're going through, whether it's birth or death or a new job or
mhm,
divorce or whatever it might be, um, it's genuine, it's true, but the function of capitalism is to make it so it's damn near impossible that you can actually follow up in the ways you want to
wow.
in that attention, right?
Yeah.
Um, Capitalism requires that we are individualistic, that we are disconnected, that we rely on systems that are lackluster at best. And so, there is that individual um, regard in having to show up as you have said you've intended to, but we are like functioning in a system that doesn't make that easy at all.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I feel like I haven't thought about it in that way.
Yeah,
And I love it when those moments happen because it's also even making me think about, well, yeah, other people have, obviously, we know this, they have their lives too, and
yeah,
they have to survive in their own way. And I mean, we can go on and on about this, but I haven't looked at it from that lens or perspective, as well. So
yeah. I mean, for example, like I would love to spend my days cooking meals and dropping them off at people's houses or going to sit bedside with somebody or, running errands for an elder who can't. I would love to spend my days like that. But when you have to work a full time job and a side hustle and part time
yes.
job to pay your rent or do whatever, it just, that is one of the barriers that keeps care stagnant in the ways that it is.
Yeah, especially even coming from a US centric lens, right?
Right.
Is like globally there, and that's what you went back to the healthcare system, right? Globally, there's other things put in place that can
Mhm.
um, help folks through these different life transitions. But being here in the US, these are our realities as well,
Yeah.
but that can be other people's realities too, globally. And yeah, because I'm also, it's also making me think about this, that I was just talking about this with actually some of our cohort members,
Mhm.
from Pause. And we were talking about to even value the work that we do, and even specifically spotlighting you right now, right? To value the work that you do.
Mhm.
And when you're talking about how you would love to be doing this, it's like, yeah, I can be doing this. And,
Right.
this is me just unapologetically saying, like, well, you have to pay me, right, for my
Mhm.
services. And I think that's one thing too, is even educating folks on the value of having
Mhm.
someone like you with them on their journey.
Yeah.
And so I just want to advocate for you right now and just
Thanks.
put that out there. I'm bringing the Beyonce energy, right? Like you
Thank
need
you.
to because it is standing even in your own worth to
Mhm.
understand. Like I said, like when I was first looking at birth doulas, right? I was looking at the prices and I was like, I don't think,
Mm.
this is in our budget. This is
Right.
not in our budget. But if we're actually really truly talking about life and death, when we
Mhm.
say like this is a life and death situation, like it is. And
Mhm.
so like what would you be willing to pay for that and to have somebody alongside you that is going to dedicate life's most valuable commodity, which is their time,
Mhm.
and to be able to give that wholly and with the care that you're delivering, I
Mhm.
feel like that is invaluable, right?
Yeah.
And it's again just making me think about, for me, right, is what is that going to look like? How do I want to plan? How do I want to invest in what my death will be?
Mhm.
And so sometimes even explaining the work that we do, the way that we do, and again, spotlighting you on the work that you do, sometimes I think we find ourselves trying to validate, what it
Mhm.
is that we do. So it takes conversations like this for people to truly understand.
Yeah. Ooh, so much there. So first, yeah, just in the value of it, like, right, we know that care work is undervalued across the board, right?
Absolutely.
That ties into how parenthood, motherhood in particular, with, the social constructs of those expectations are devalued, right? And so those things are tied together. But then I also think about how, as folks are transitioning into a more of a yearning and desire for education and support along these transitions, um, the money piece of it does bring up things for folks, questions.
Hmm.
And I would say my excuse me, my standpoint on it is money is energy, right? And so, um, what energy do you want to put into your experience? Oftentimes, at least the birth workers and death workers that I'm in community with, including myself, will set a price that we believe to be kind of embodying the value of our work. And oftentimes, folks are willing to work with you.
Hmm.
um, there are sliding scales, there are payment plans, there are opportunities to barter and exchange services. So I think wrapped up in how I desire, in particular, to bring value to care work, there's also a shift in how we exchange currency and how we exchange energy in that way, too, that I think is required to get where we want to be when we think about community care. Um, the industries that are said to be caring for us are billion-dollar industries,
Yes.
and they're doing a mediocre job. And so how do we shift that energetically and practically by where we put our money? And
And to
so
find
I think
other
I think it happens.
ways, right? And
Yeah.
to find other ways that can serve us better.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for that. I know I got a little bit passionate about that right there, but
I
I
love
was,
it.
I was just, having this conversation. I was like, why not? Because it is the truth. And again, it goes back to people are still going back to that taboo-ness that you were talking about, is people are still just getting comfortable with talking about this,
Yeah.
and being able to understand what are the resources out there for them, because we've been so used to, even what you're talking about, those billion-dollar industries, that this is the way to go. And I mean, we
Mhm.
can go on and on about this, even talking about holistic medicine, and those different routes, or even the nutrition and the food we eat. But I also do want to
Yeah.
just call out, like, I understand fully that access is an issue. And
Yeah.
I think that's what you were talking about with the machine of, well, I have to have two or three jobs now, and how can I do this? But hopefully that we can find a way to give people the support they need in these different transitions of life,
Yeah.
that they have.
I think we're on our way.
Okay, good. Well, with people like you, for sure. Um, Okay, so as we close today, I know we've had so many great things to talk about. I always ask folks these same two questions. So
Okay.
I will give them to you and you can give us your answer. So the first question is, if you were to say hello to someone today who is grieving, what would you say to them?
You are not alone. I would say you are not alone. I think when we're in the thick of grief, um, it feels like we're the only ones going through it, the only ones who have ever been through it, the only ones who will ever go through it. And so I think it's important to remember that it's quite the opposite and that you're not alone.
All right, thank you. And the second question is, if you were to say hello to your own grief today, what would you say to it? What would you say to your grief?
Juicy. I would say, girl, we did that.
That's probably one of the best answers yet.
That's what I would say. Keep
Oh,
going.
I love that. I love that. I'm probably gonna have to clip that one so other people can hear that one. Oh my goodness, I appreciate it. And I think that just shows like how, if you truly do like invest in yourself and in your process and in your journey and your own healing, like we can get to this point where we can laugh about that and
Yeah,
and we can acknowledge it and we can say yes you did. So
yeah. Not
uh,
every day will be like that, but many of them will.
and that's great to throw in too, right? So
Yeah.
because it's and that was today, maybe
Hmm.
it's something different tomorrow or in a year from now. Um,
Yeah.
but thank you for that. And okay, so I want to know, since you dropped so much knowledge for us and people can learn so much more from you, where can listeners find you and say hello to you, Briana?
Yes. So my website is unearthingtradition.com. I can be found on all platforms at Unearthing Tradition. Yeah, I would love to connect with anyone who is eager to just be in relationship and collaboration. That's where you can find me.
Perfect. Thank you. And I'll also be placing and providing this information in the podcast description so people can find the links there. Please
Okay.
reach out. Please say hello to Briana. And I will go ahead and close for us today. And it's just been
Thank
so
you.
wonderful to have you
Thank you
on.
so much.
Yes, of course. I'm glad we finally got to do this.
Me too.
Yeah. So if
Perfect
grief
timing.
has taught me anything, it is that time is our most valuable resource. So thank you for giving your time today. Thank you for taking the time to say hello to grief today. There are so many people in this world grieving the loss of someone or something, and it's not my goal to reach every single one of them. It's simply to reach one. And I hope that person is you. I hope you took at least one thing from listening today and that helps you on your journey. Take the time to say hello to your grief today, and better yet, say hello to someone else because you never know who you will be greeting in their grief. And I would love to say hello to all of you. So please follow me at Hello I'm Grieving on Instagram or any social channel at Hello I'm Grieving. And let me know what resonated with you and what topics you would like to learn about. So until next time, I look forward to saying hello.